I'm standing at the entrance to a garden ceremony, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, about to marry a man I've loved for 18 months. In my hand is a speech I wrote at 3 a.m. last night. It's not the speech anyone expects. It's not the speech my mother helped me rehearse. It's not even the speech I wrote 2 weeks ago about finding my soulmate and building our forever. It's the speech I wrote after I stood outside a hotel room door and heard my fiancé tell his best friend, "I know I'm being selfish. Marrying Claire is the only way my family will stop asking questions, but I can't be the man she deserves." In about 5 minutes, I'm going to walk down this aisle, and in about 15 minutes, I'm going to say something that will change both of our lives forever. But I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to throw anything. I'm not going to cause a scene. I'm going to tell the truth, calmly, clearly, with the same grace I've brought to every stage I've ever directed. Because I'm Claire Donovan, I'm 33 years old, I'm an independent theater director, and I don't do drama in real life, only on stage where it belongs. This is the story of how I almost married a lie, and how I chose myself instead.
I met Graham Sinclair at an art gallery fundraiser in Boston. I was there because a filmmaker friend needed feedback on the lighting design for an immersive exhibition. I'm good at noticing what other people miss, where the shadows fall wrong, where the focus pulls your eye when it shouldn't. It's my job to see what's invisible to most people. Graham was standing in the mirrored installation room, explaining the spatial layout to a small group. He wasn't the artist, he was the primary sponsor. Family money, the kind of wealth that doesn't announce itself but quietly funds everything interesting in the city. We started talking because we both noticed the same flaw, a spotlight angled wrong, casting the main sculpture's face in shadow instead of light. "That's criminal," I said, half to myself. "Finally," he replied, turning to me with the first genuine smile I'd seen from him, someone who actually sees it. That's how it started, with both of us seeing the same thing everyone else missed. Graham pursued me the way wealthy, educated men do when they've been taught that patience and politeness are the highest virtues. He texted thoughtful questions about my work. He showed up at my theater productions with a single white rose, never a bouquet, never anything showy. He brought me tea when I worked late, never asking for anything in return. He was the opposite of every man I'd dated before. No urgency, no pressure, no clumsy attempts to get me into bed after the second date. Just presence, calm, steady, respectful presence. After 2 years of being single following a chaotic relationship with an actor who burned hot and cold, Graham felt like coming home to a house with all the lights on. Safe, predictable, right. We dated for 6 months before he kissed me properly, and even then it was brief, a closed-mouth press of lips that felt more like punctuation than passion. I told myself it was refreshing, that I was tired of men who led with their hormones, that mature love was supposed to feel like this, stable, respectful, founded on intellectual compatibility rather than animal attraction. When he proposed on stage at my students' graduation showcase in front of 200 people, I said yes without hesitation. He knew I hated public displays, but he said, "This time, let everyone see you at the center." I was moved, touched, certain that I'd found the partner who truly valued me. I was wrong. The Sinclair family is old Boston money, the kind that appears in historical society newsletters and has a wing of the hospital named after them. Graham's mother, Patricia, was a former museum curator who now spent her time on charitable boards and writing op-eds about maintaining cultural standards. His father, William, was a retired federal judge whose handshake felt like both a greeting and an assessment. They welcomed me with the kind of warmth that felt like approval, conditional, measured, contingent on my continued good behavior. Patricia sent me articles, Modern Women Who Honor Tradition, The Lost Art of Gracious Hosting, Why Privacy Matters in an Oversharing Age.
At Sunday dinners, William would toast the Sinclair family values, a phrase that seemed to mean something specific to everyone but me. "We're so glad Graham found you," Patricia said once, touching my hand. "You're exactly what this family needs. Refined, discreet, not one of those women who broadcasts every detail online." I wasn't spoken about as myself. I was spoken about as a role I'd been cast in without auditioning. And Graham, he never disagreed with them, not once. He'd smile his small, measured smile and say, "My mother's right, we value privacy." I started to notice how often he used we when he meant they. Our physical relationship, if you could call it that, existed in a strange liminal space. We kissed, we held hands, we shared a bed when I stayed at his apartment, but we never progressed. There was always a reason. He was tired, he had early meetings, he'd had too much wine and didn't want our first time to be impaired. "I want it to be perfect," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "You deserve perfect." At first, it felt romantic, patient, respectful. Then it felt odd. Then it felt like avoidance. One night, about 3 months before the wedding, I reached for him in bed, just touched his shoulder, an invitation. He flinched, actually flinched, like I'd startled him awake from a dream. "Sorry," he said, immediately, turning toward me with that reflexive smile. "You surprised me." He kissed my forehead, patted my shoulder, rolled over. I lay awake the rest of that night staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was being unreasonable, wondering if I was asking for something he wasn't capable of giving, wondering if this was just what mature, evolved love looked like. I didn't talk to anyone about it, because how do you explain to your friends that your fiancé is too respectful, that he treats you too well, that everything is too perfect? They already thought I'd won the lottery. Handsome, wealthy, thoughtful Graham Sinclair, who brought me tea and listened to my rehearsal notes and never once raised his voice. On paper, he was perfect. In practice, I was engaged to a man who treated me like a cherished colleague, a valued partner in a business arrangement, a lovely piece of furniture in the life he was curating, but never like someone he desired, someone he burned for, someone he couldn't keep his hands off. I told myself I was being shallow, that good sex wasn't everything, that companionship and respect were more important than passion. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true.
The pre-wedding dinner was held at the Harborview Hotel, where we'd also reserved the ballroom for the next day's ceremony. 50 guests, soft lighting, a string quartet, everything elegant and understated, exactly the way the Sinclairs preferred. I was exhausted despite having done nothing but smile and accept compliments all evening. Around 9 o'clock, I excused myself and went upstairs to my room to rest before tomorrow. The second-floor hallway was quiet. As I approached my room, I heard voices coming from the suite at the end of the corridor. The door was open a crack. I recognized Graham's voice immediately. I should have kept walking. I should have gone to my room, called my best friend, done anything other than what I actually did. I stopped walking. I stepped back into the shadow of a doorway, and I listened. "I can't keep doing this," Graham was saying. His voice sounded different, rawer, more unguarded than I'd ever heard it. "But marrying Claire is the only way my family will stop pushing, the only way to make this manageable." "Are you sure you're not pulling her into something unfair?" Another man's voice, concerned, careful. I recognized it. Marcus Chen, Graham's college roommate, the friend who was always around but rarely spoke when I was present. "I don't have a choice," Graham said, and I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Not calculation, just exhaustion. "I'm not strong enough to lose everything, the business, the family, the reputation. I'm not brave enough to live honestly." "You're not wrong for being who you are," Marcus said quietly, "but you are wrong if you make someone else pay for your fear." Silence. Then Graham again. "I know Claire deserves better. I know she deserves a man who can love her the way she should be loved. But I can't be that man. I'm not built that way, and I'm too much of a coward to tell her the truth." I didn't hear what came next. I was already walking away. Not running, just walking with deliberate steps back to my room. I closed the door,
locked it, sat on the edge of the bed, and I understood everything. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised, really. All the pieces I'd been trying to ignore suddenly arranged themselves into a picture I could finally see clearly. The respectful distance, the lack of physical desire, the way he sometimes looked at Marcus with an expression I'd never seen him turn toward me. The elaborate performance of our relationship that always felt like we were following a script neither of us had written. Graham was gay, or maybe bisexual, or maybe just not attracted to women. The label didn't matter. What mattered was that he'd chosen me not because he loved me, but because I was acceptable, because I was the kind of woman his conservative old money family could embrace, because I was refined and discreet and didn't ask too many questions, because I was the perfect cover. And I'd been so busy feeling grateful to be chosen by someone so evolved that I'd never asked the most important question. Was he choosing me, or was he choosing safety? I sat there on that hotel bed for 3 hours, thinking about all the moments I'd rationalized, all the red flags I'd painted green, all the times I'd told myself I was being unreasonable for wanting more than what he was giving. I thought about the life we'd planned, the tasteful house in Brookline, the dinner parties with his family's friends, the charity galas, the measured, careful existence where everything looked perfect on the surface. I thought about growing old as Graham's elegant, accomplished wife, the woman everyone admired, the woman no one truly knew, the woman slowly disappearing behind the role she'd been hired to play. And I thought, no, I will not be someone's shield. No, I will not trade my authentic life for a beautiful cage. No, I will not stand at an altar tomorrow and promise forever to a man who sees me as a solution to a problem instead of as a person he actually wants to build a life with. At 3 a.m., I rewrote my wedding speech. I woke at 6 without an alarm, got my hair and makeup done, put on the dress, ivory silk, simple lines, exactly what I would have chosen if the wedding were real. Everything looked perfect. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a stranger, a beautifully styled, empty-eyed stranger playing a role in someone else's story. The ceremony was set for 11 o'clock in the hotel's garden, white chairs in neat rows, arrangements of white roses and eucalyptus, a string quartet playing something classical and appropriate. Everyone arrived. My mother, my sister, my theater friends, my former students, Graham's enormous extended family, all looking pleased and proud that their boy had found such a suitable match. I stood in the bridal suite, watching through the window as guests took their seats. My mother came in, tears already forming. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "Thanks, Mom." "Are you nervous?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm clear." She didn't understand what I meant. She wouldn't for another hour. I walked down the aisle at exactly 11 a.m., each step measured, each breath controlled, the muscle memory of 100 stage performances keeping my face serene, my posture perfect. Graham stood at the altar in his dove-gray suit, hands clasped in front of him, that small, appropriate smile on his face. He looked like a groom. He looked like someone's future husband. He looked like a man playing the role of his life. We faced each other. The officiant, a retired judge friend of William's, began the ceremony. Graham spoke his vows first, elegant, appropriate vows about admiration and respect and partnership, about shared values and building a life of purpose together. Every word was perfect. Every word was empty. Then it was my turn. I took one breath, pulled the folded paper from inside my bouquet, and I began. "I rewrote my vows this morning," I said clearly, my theater voice carrying to the back rows without shouting. "Because I believe people should get married with truth, not with a script someone else wrote for them." A few people chuckled, thinking I was making a clever metaphor about my work as a director. I wasn't. "Graham, you're a good man," I continued, looking directly at him. His face hadn't changed, but I saw his hand tighten on the small cards where his own vows were written. "You're kind. You're thoughtful. You've treated me with respect and care, and I genuinely believe you want to do right by the people in your life." His mother was smiling, probably thinking I was delivering the kind of gracious speech she'd expect. "But marriage can't be built on kindness alone," I said, my voice steady. "And it can't begin as a performance where one person is playing a role they never chose." The smiles were fading now. People were starting to understand this wasn't going where they expected. I turned slightly, addressing the crowd as much as Graham. "I believe everyone has the right to live as who they truly are," I said clearly. "I believe some personal truths don't need justification or explanation. I believe that being true to yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary." Graham's face had gone very still. "But I also believe that no one has the right to use someone else as shelter from that truth. No one has the right to turn another person into a shield for their fear." Total silence now. You could hear the wind moving through the eucalyptus. "Last night," I said, "I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear, and I learned that this wedding isn't happening because we're in love. It's happening because I'm acceptable, because I fit the image, because I won't ask the wrong questions or demand the wrong things." Graham's face had drained of color. His mother half stood, but William put a hand on her arm, holding her still. "I'm not angry," I said, "and I meant it. I'm not hurt in the way you might think. I don't hate you, Graham. I just finally understand what I've been pretending not to see for 18 months. I looked at him with something that might have been compassion, might have been pity, might just have been sad recognition of two people who'd been using each other. Him as a shield, me as proof that I was worthy of being chosen. "You don't need a wife," I said quietly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear. "You need a life you don't have to hide from, and I need to stop settling for being someone's perfect illusion." I slipped the engagement ring off my finger, 3 carats, princess cut, family stone, and set it gently on the small table beside the officiant. "I hope someday you find the courage to live honestly. I hope your family learns to love who you actually are instead of who they want you to be. And I hope you find happiness that doesn't require someone else to sacrifice theirs." Then I looked out at the crowd, at the shocked faces, at my mother, whose hand was covering her mouth, at Patricia Sinclair, whose carefully composed expression had cracked into something almost like panic. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "I'm sorry to waste your afternoon, but I'd rather end this now with truth than live a lie for the rest of my life." I picked up my bouquet, turned, and walked back down the aisle. My footsteps on the white runner were the only sound in the entire garden. No one stopped me, no one spoke, no one had any argument to make against a truth spoken without malice. I walked past my mother, past my sister, past faces I'd known for years frozen in various stages of shock and confusion and uncomfortable recognition. I walked through the garden gate, through the hotel lobby, out the front doors into the bright June sunshine, and I kept walking. I'm back in my small apartment in Cambridge, the one I kept instead of moving into Graham's pristine Beacon Hill brownstone, the one with the cluttered desk and the kitchen I rarely use and the view of nothing special, the one that's mine. I went back to work the week after the non-wedding. My students asked how the ceremony went. "It went exactly the way it needed to," I told them, and I smiled because it was true. I'm directing a new play, one I wrote myself. It's called The Understudy, a story about people who spend their lives playing supporting roles in other people's productions, about what happens when they finally walk off stage. It's getting good reviews. People say it's my most honest work. They're right. I don't know what happened to Graham after that day. I heard through mutual friends that he and Marcus are living together now, that Patricia and William have chosen to prioritize family privacy during this transitional time. which is wealthy person code for they're pretending it didn't happen while quietly cutting him off financially until he agrees to therapy aimed at clarifying his confusion. I hope he finds his way out. I hope he finds the courage he didn't have when we were together. But that's his story to write, not mine. I'm done being a character in someone else's narrative. My mother called me a week after the wedding. She'd spent the intervening days in what she called processing, which really meant being embarrassed in front of her friends. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "I could have helped you handle it privately. You didn't have to humiliate everyone in public." "I didn't humiliate anyone, Mom," I said quietly. "I just stopped pretending." "But couldn't you have done that before the wedding, before we'd spent all that money, before 200 people showed up?" "Probably," I admitted, "but I needed to stand at that altar and look at him and know with absolute certainty that I was making the right choice. I needed to see his family and mine and everyone who'd told me how lucky I was. I needed to say the truth out loud, where it couldn't be quietly managed or explained away." She was silent for a long moment. "Your father would have understood," she finally said. And that was when I cried. Not because of Graham, not because of the wedding, but because my mother, who'd spent my entire life teaching me to be accommodating, to be pleasant, to not make waves, had just given me the only permission I'd ever really needed, the permission to disappoint people. Here's what I wish someone had told me when I was 25 and believed that being chosen was the same thing as being loved. Being someone's safe choice is not a compliment. Being someone's acceptable option is not a victory. Being the person someone marries because you won't ask hard questions is not the same as being the person someone chooses because they can't imagine life without you. If your relationship feels more like a well-run corporation than a love story, pay attention. If your partner treats you with perfect respect but never hunger, ask why. If you're constantly performing a version of yourself that's just acceptable enough, just quiet enough, just small enough to fit the frame they've built, stop. I don't regret loving Graham. I regret not loving myself enough to ask harder questions sooner. But I don't regret walking away. The best thing I ever did was stand at that altar and tell the truth. Not to hurt him, not to humiliate his family, not to cause a scene, but to say out loud, in front of everyone who told me I was lucky, I am worth more than being someone's beautiful lie. You are too. What would you have done in Claire's position? Would you have walked away quietly before the wedding or said the truth at the altar? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories about choosing truth over comfort.